We'd all agree that God is angry with the wicked. But think, does God ever get angry with Christians? The answer might surprise you. We who run life's race need to pause long enough to face the reality of Hebrews chapter 3. Today, the key reason why God sometimes gets angry with his children. Stay with us. From Chicago's Moody Church, this is Running to Win with Dr. Erwin Lutzer, whose clear teaching helps us make it across the finish line. Our current series is Highlights from Hebrews, and today we turn to Hebrews chapter 3. In this, the second message in his series, Dr. Lutzer will teach us about living with missed opportunities.
I want us today to begin by thinking a little bit about your temper. You do have one, don't you? You know, we as human beings, we have our boiling point. We can blow our stack rather easily, some more easily than others. All of us have become angry. We've lost our temper, and we wish that we wouldn't have because we did wrong by doing it. There is such a thing as righteous anger. There's also a lot of something called unrighteous anger. And I think that one of the reasons that we sometimes make mistakes is because we have limited knowledge. We don't know all the facts, and yet we comment on the facts and we say things that we later regret because we mistook the situation. I can't even begin to tell you the number of times that I've been angry with Rebecca, to be very embarrassed later to discover that I had become angry and I didn't know everything. I hadn't heard the full story. So we're limited in our understanding, and we are also limited in the way we feel. We are in a good mood, our kids can get away with almost anything. We're in a bad mood and we're lashing out and we're angry at the slightest thing. I remember growing up just like you, and you can remember it too, how I never went to my parents unless I first discerned the mood, depending on what I wanted. You know, you knew that this was not the time to ask for what you wanted. And then there were those relaxed moments when you thought this might be the time, because all of us have our moods. And then another problem with us as humans, with our tempers, the fact that we don't have a good, accurate concept of justice. Sometimes we overreact because we're too strict, and sometimes we're too lenient, and that's why parents don't agree. Not everyone agrees with the way in which we reared our children, and we might not agree with the way you reared yours because we're imperfect. We ourselves stand in the need of grace, and so some people give more grace and some people withhold grace. But now I want you to think for a moment about God and his anger. Take your Bibles and turn to the 3rd chapter of the book of Hebrews, and we come to chapter 3, and we discover that God can be angry. I wrestled with this message because I know we live in a day and age when we have a gentler, kinder God who's not supposed to be angry. In fact, I can imagine somebody coming up to me afterwards and saying, you know, my God doesn't get angry. By the way, if you feel that way, please come and talk to me afterwards. I'd like to help you over that hump, so to speak. Because there's some things I'd like to lovingly say to you if you think that you have a God who doesn't become angry. But in Hebrews chapter 3, we're shocked at God's anger. Verse 10, therefore I was angry with this generation and said, they do always go astray in their heart, and they did not know my ways, and I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter into my rest. That's anger. It says in verse 15, they hardened their hearts, they provoked me. God was upset. The Greek word means he was wrought up. He was worked up over this. Now you think about God's anger and you find out that it does not have our limitations because he knows all things. God has never become angry and then had to regret it because he miscalculated it and there's a piece of the information that was missing. That's never happened with God. He's never overlooked anything. He never had some new light shed on the situation that would enable him to see the issue a little bit better. Secondly, God is not subject to mood. fluctuations like we are. Do you realize that God is always in a good mood? He has to be, because how could we possibly rejoice in God if He were grumpy someday? We rejoice in God on a day that He happens to be angry without cause, or I should say in a bad mood. No, that's not possible. Pun coming up. Listen up, everybody. To put it clearly, God is never moody. We are moody. I'm moody, but God isn't moody. Furthermore, God has a perfect standard of justice. So when He gets angry, His is always a just kind of anger. When God says, I was angry and I swore in my anger, they will not enter into my rest. It was done with justice and legitimacy. Now, the question is, why all this anger coming from God? In order to understand this passage, we should put it in context. You remember the first message that we preached, chapter 1, Christ is greater and more superior than the angels. Chapter 2, He is more superior than any other priest. Chapter 3, He is more superior than Moses. You'll notice it says in verse 1 of chapter 3, therefore, holy brethren, partakers of a heavenly calling, consider Jesus, the apostle and high priest of our confession, who was faithful to Him who appointed him, as Moses was faithful over all his house. For he has been counted worthy of more glory than Moses, just as much as the builder of the house has more honor than the house. Now, don't miss his point. What he's saying is that Jesus is now superior to Moses, and if God was angry with that generation because they didn't respect Moses, beware of what God might think and do to you if you do not respect His beloved Son. Now, this is a serious message today. Of course, all my messages are serious, but there are some that are more serious than others. And this one is a high degree of seriousness. Serious in capitals today. And so the Lord is saying that under Moses they had great opportunities, and